Hello, it's Randi Rhodes. Here's a clip from our show, and go to randyrhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.
Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon.
I have a dream.
Change has come to America.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
I will vote against the nomination of Judge Neil Gorsuch today. I made this decision after questioning him extensively in private and in our hearing, reviewing his record, and deliberating carefully and deeply. It's one of the most important votes I will ever cast. I am still angry about the treatment of Merrick Garland.
I do too.
Our Republican colleagues have said that if the shoe were on the other foot, this side would have done the same. It would have been as wrong if we had done it as it was when they did. But my vote is not about Merrick Garland. It is all about Neil Gorsuch. And it is about the constitutional crisis that may well be looming as a potential threat to our democracy. The FBI director has revealed that his agency is investigating ties between President Donald Trump's associates and Russian meddling election. The independence of our judicial branch has never been more threatened or more important.
Merrick Garland.
The possibility of a Supreme Court needing to enforce a subpoena against the President of the United States is far from idle speculation. It has happened before in United States versus Nixon. President Trump has launched a campaign of vicious and relentless attacks on the credibility of our judiciary. His disparaging comments have attempted to shake the foundations of respect for judicial rulings, the credibility and trust that is so essential to our Supreme Court and all our courts. And it is a respect that is vital to holding the President himself accountable to the people and our Constitution.
Oh, my God. Did Senator Richard Blumenthal just say he couldn't vote for Gorsuch because Gorsuch would be charged with serving the subpoena to the president in case of an impeachment that he believes is looming? Yes, he did. Wow. That was very telling. That was very informative. Thank you, Senator Blumenthal. Now, Diane is not voting for him.
Our job is to assess whether the nominee will protect the legal and constitutional rights of all Americans, and whether the nominee recognizes the humanity and justice required when evaluating the cases before him. Unfortunately, based on Judge Gorsuch's record at the Department of Justice, his tenure on the bench, his appearance before the Senate, and his written questions for the record, I cannot support this nomination.
Oh, that's too bad. Yeah, so basically what this is, we're filibustering. I was going to call him Senator. We're filibustering charming Mr. Gorsuch. We're not going to allow him to be confirmed with 60 votes, which is the standard by which all of our Supreme Court justices currently have been confirmed. 60 votes. Yeah, 60. I know it's hard to believe that 60 people could actually be cobbled together to vote for Clarence Thomas, but they did. And every single Supreme Court justice sitting on the Supreme Court has been confirmed with the same standard. Now, we have this guy Gorsuch, and of course, the reason why people do not want to vote for him are long, and they have nothing. You know, yes, everybody's upset about, Garland. I mean, my first question for Gorsuch would be, how could you say that you're about law and order when you've already received stolen property? And that stolen property, of course, is the seat that belonged to Merrick Garland. But of course, the Senate made up some fantastical story that Merrick Garland, because President Obama only had a mere 12 months, a mere year to serve, that the president was unable and illegitimate enough to not allow him to confirm or to nominate a Supreme Court justice. And Garland didn't even get a hearing. Garland got nothing. He didn't get an up or down vote. He didn't get he got nothing. He didn't even get to, appear in front of the Senate, and that was wrong. But they are now saying why they can't vote for him. And the reason why they can't vote for him has much more to do with the way that he ruled while he was on the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals than any other thing, except for Richard Blumenthal, who brought up a very interesting point, and that is that they cannot vote for Gorsuch because Gorsuch is too close to Trump, and he might have to be the one that serves the subpoena when the House impeaches him. Hadn't heard that one before. But of course, that now we have 41 senators standing in the way. They've all made clear that they will vote no on Gorsuch. So that means that Gorsuch cannot, it would be impossible for him to get 60 votes, which is what every Supreme Court justice sitting now has had to do. And so now you've got Turtle Boy McConnell saying that he will suspend the rule, or he will change the rules, not suspend them, but change them so that a Supreme Court nominee will only require a mere majority, 51 votes. Now, the Republicans have 52. So even if they lost one, Pence would break the tie. I mean, this is ridiculous. This is really ridiculous. But this is what they have in mind for us. They have in mind to turn the Senate into the House. What do I mean by that? Well, the Senate was described as by the founding fathers as the saucer to the teacup. What does that mean? It means the teacup holds the very hot emotions of the House of Representatives, the very, crazy and raucous House of Representatives. They have a lot of emotion and they scream and they yell and they stomp their feet and they yell, "You lie," at the president. And the Senate is more deliberate. The Senate takes its time. The Senate is slower. It is the saucer that cools the hot boiling tempers of the House. And the way that it does that is by its rules. And the way that it does that is by it being more collegial, more discriminating, more deliberate in its decisions. And so that is why the Senate has different rules than the House. But if McConnell has his way here, and just in fairness, may I say that if the Democrats and the Republicans would simply swap talking points about going nuclear, depending upon who is currently in the majority and who is currently in the minority, you might have an argument to make about how the Democrats, when they're in the majority, they don't want a filibuster change, but when the Democrats are in the minority, they do, and that the Republicans, same thing, and they should just swap their talking point, right? You could except for this fact. The Republicans have had the majority throughout almost every minute of Obama's presidency except the first 5 minutes, right? And the Republicans have obstructed more than any other party Obama's, legislative agenda more than any other party in the history of the United States. It was the most obstruction you ever saw in your life. They brought using their majority status, their majority rule, but they just brought Obama to a screeching halt. So, there's no equality there. However, that said, if the Senate allows for just a mere majority for Supreme Court nominees, then who's to say that they won't use a suspension of the rules or a changing of the rules for ordinary legislation? And then the House and the Senate are the same body. They operate the same way. And we don't have a Senate anymore. And that's sickening, because the reason the Democrats are opposing Gorsuch is completely based on Gorsuch and Gorsuch's crummy record. He has a terrible record of finding for the very elite, the very well-heeled. You know the Trans Am case of the trucker, the frozen trucker case. That's another name for it. You know the case about the little boy with autism. He changed the wording of the law so that he could come to the decision he came to and deny the autistic boy's parents reimbursement for a special school they found that would increase the opportunities for this autistic boy. He changed the words in the law. Dianne Feinstein talked about this today. I think it's important that you hear this from her because, frankly, this is the reason why they are opposing Gorsuch.
Schools shouldn't be segregated. Judge Gorsuch instead said it was, quote, the correct application of precedent, end quote. To be clear, when he asked if he supported Brown, Judge Gorsuch refused to directly answer. In contrast, when Justice Kennedy was asked about Brown, he replied, and I quote, I think Brown v. Board of Education was right when it was decided, and I think it would have been right if it had been decided 80 years before, end quote. In another exchange, Senator Franken asked about a wave of recent laws to restrict access to voting. These laws were found to target African Americans with surgical precision. Senator Franken discussed the effect of these laws, but he simply asked if Judge Gorsuch was disturbed by efforts to disenfranchise African American voters. The question has but one easy answer, and it's yes. Yet, instead of agreeing, Judge Gorsuch ducked the question. He responded, and I quote, if there are allegations of racism in legislation in the voting area, there are a variety of remedies, end quote. Even Justice Alito was more candid. When asked about affirmative action, Justice Alito replied, I have personal experience about how valuable having people with diverse backgrounds and viewpoints can be. Having a diverse student body is a compelling interest. Going even further, in 1987, Senator Biden asked Justice Kennedy not what he thought about affirmative action generally, but whether the voluntary affirmative action plans are legally permissible. Judge Kennedy unequivocally responded yes. Unfortunately, Judge Gorsuch's answers were so diluted with ambiguity, one could not see where he stood, even on big and long-settled cases. When I asked Judge Gorsuch about his work at the Department of Justice involving the Bush administration's defense of the use of torture, despite providing relevant documents, Judge Gorsuch said only that, quote, his memory is what it is, and it isn't great on this, end quote. And that the position he took on torture, quote, was the position that clients were telling him, end quote, to take.
I remember that.
Not only did he not answer my question, he raised an additional concern. I strongly believe that when you work for the government, either as a lawyer or a policymaker, it's important to comment on the legality of the issue you advise or write. To say, I did what they wanted, is not enough, particularly if the legality is contradicted by both law and treaty. I also believe it's important to remember the context. At this point, our country was involved in detaining people indefinitely, without charge or trial, leaving them with no rights, no meaningful opportunity to challenge their confinement. The government had also decided the executive could order the use of certain enhanced interrogation techniques that included waterboarding, stress positions, and sleep deprivation, as well as a host of other techniques which would and did result in death and serious debilitation of detainees. It was April 2004 when the public first learned about the prisoner abuse chronicled in the Abu Ghraib photos. Then, in June of 2004, information was leaked to the media that the Department of Justice had issued legal opinions that stated enhanced interrogation techniques were within the law, unless they inflicted the kind of pain associated with organ failure or death.
Right.
Judge Gorsuch reached out to the White House political director in November 2004, approximately 6 months after these revelations, to say how he wanted to help the cause and be a full-time member of the team. Then, in March 2005, he reached out to the chairman of the Republican National Committee, who vouched for Gorsuch as a true loyalist and a good, strong conservative. Judge Gorsuch ultimately joined the Bush administration in June of 2005. Through our examination of his documents, we learned that during his tenure at the Department of Justice, he was involved in efforts to strip detainees of their ability to have habeas cases heard by federal courts, defend and protect the Bush administration's position on torture, and issue an expansive signing statement on the Detainee Treatment Act. These statements were used to highlight parts of the law the administration intended not to follow. Importantly, we learned that Judge Gorsuch advocated for the Bush administration to issue a broad signing statement. He said it could be used to, and I quote, help inoculate against the potential of having the administration criticized sometime in the future for not making sufficient changes in interrogation policy in light of the McCain portion of the amendment. This statement clearly and in a formal way that would be hard to dispute later.
You get the idea? Judge Gorsuch, I mean, I was really shocked when I heard Judge Gorsuch's answer. Well, you know, Dianne Feinstein was very concerned with torture, and she had visited black sites. She knew what was going on back in 2004 or 5. And now we find out that Judge Gorsuch was the key to the empire, meaning he told President Bush that even after the McCain Amendment passed, banning torture, banning enhanced interrogation techniques, banning waterboarding, sleep deprivation, debilitating, stress positions for days on end, that if the president accepted that law but added a signing statement saying, I accept this law, but it doesn't apply to me. I'm the commander guy. Yes, sir. I can do what I want. You can pass all the laws that you want, but I'm a wartime president. And so these laws don't apply to me. That was Gorsuch's idea. That was his brilliance. I mean, this is sick. So you know why they're opposed to him. They're opposed to him because of the frozen trucker case. They're opposed to him because of the kid with autism. By the way, I have to find that little snippet of Dianne Feinstein saying he changed the words of the law so that he could twist himself into a position to say, no, parents, you don't get reimbursed for your kids' special school that can really create a world of opportunity for your autistic kid. No, pay for it out of your pocket. The Department of Education owes you nothing. But that is why Democrats are against Gorsuch. They're not against Gorsuch because they just seem to be political or they're trying to create gridlock. It's based on his career, his record, his writing, his deliberate attack on what Congress does, which is pass laws. Go to RandiRhodes.com for the whole thing and a podcast. Buy a stinking podcast.